Hi, I'm Marty Schupak from Schupak Sports, and welcome to this episode. We talk about different sports tips, drills. We do some interviews, and we try to uh, really cover the whole gamut of youth sports and sports in general. And this episode is geared mostly to T-ball coaches and T-ball parents. I urge you stay on if your kids are not in T-ball. I promise you'll get some ideas. We're going to be talking about using homemade props, which is a topic which I've gone over before. I've tried to expand it a little in this episode. But before we start, I always like to start with a little trivia. So here we go. Okay. And has to do with soccer, the World Cup. All right. There's been only one country that has been in every World Cup tournament. There have been 28 tournaments, and that encompasses a total of 88 years, but only one country has been in all of them. So try to think that over, and at the end, I'll come back to that and give you the right answer. Anyway, as far as homemade props, I've gone through this a few times. You might have heard me talk about it or read about it in some of my books. But when my kids were younger and I got involved in youth sports, budget restraints made it so that some of the things I wanted to do, I mean, I would have loved to gone out and buy a pitching machine, which I couldn't do, or a hitting net, which, it was at the time $200, $250. Some of them have come down a lot, but I had to make do with what I was able to figure out. And just so you know, when you do things with your kids and you make things at home, it's something that they'll always remember. Case in point, and again, the topic is taking things at home and making them into props, which you could use in sports. In this particular case, we're talking about young baseball and softball players. Years ago, when I was a kid, I wanted a basketball rim. Instead of just buying it, my dad bought a 4x4 piece of wood about this thick. He got a piece of plywood cut, and he had me dig the hole in the front. He had me tar the bottom of the pole. And this is after I treated it for weather. I weather treated the pole. I weather treated the plywood. Then I painted it. And the process took like 3 or 4 weeks. And we put it up, and I had to tell my dad, who was not that adept in sports, that it had to be 10 feet the rim from the rim to the ground. And he spent time, he got it done right. But the reason I'm bringing this up, it's something that I've always remembered and I've always talked about, and I tell my kids about it. So you could very easily, and I'm not discouraging, if you have the money, you want to go out and buy equipment. The sporting goods business is a multi-billion-dollar business. But maybe you take time and you get your son and daughter and you create something from your house. Okay, anyway, let's talk about different props that you may want to buy that could help kids feel comfortable, or different props that you might find around the house that you could make something for the kids. I have a pile over here. I'll go through a few of them. First thing is, I just want to say in T-ball, and this is something that it's not just hanging around the house, but I find that in T-ball, one of the biggest things to turn players off is when they get hurt at a very young age. I've seen it twice at least, where a player got hit in the head with a ball, and I don't know why the T-ball coach was using a hard ball. He should have been using a soft covered ball. They never stepped foot on a baseball field again. It was one boy and one girl. You try to make them feel comfortable, and you do that with what I call progression method. First of all, you use soft covered balls, and at the very young age in T-ball, 4, 5, or 6, you want to have them just make contact with the ball in the glove, not catch it. Now with a fly ball, what I found, the old game, which I guess is called Scratch, which has a Velcro ball and the two paddles are Velcro. This sticks to it very well. And I found that the T-ball players were very comfortable catching the ball with the Velcro paddle, okay? So keep that in mind with your team if you're coaching people or if you're doing this at home with your young kids. So this is one item, okay? Next item, and this is what I did at home. I was looking for another alternative to catching something other than a glove. I came up with the idea where I took a gallon, or actually 2 gallons of milk, cut off the bottom about a third, okay? So it looks like this. And what I did was, because after I cut it and I used the utility knife, and if you don't get it 100% straight, you don't have to worry. But on the top, I put duct tape all the way around because it is sharp and you don't want your son and daughter or players to get hurt. And we would have catches with this. I would use a rag ball, which is what I'm going to show you next. And we would toss it back and forth just as another item for your son, daughter, or players to get used to. Okay, so that's the milk carton, plastic gallon that you're cutting off a piece. Very easy to do, doesn't take a lot of time. I highly recommend it. Talking about the rag balls, what I did a number of years ago, and I learned this from our local high school, which we had an idea where he took like socks, Lola socks, and he showed how he played ball with that in his house. And it reminded me when I was a kid, we used to do the same thing with socks that were rolled up. We used to like swing with our arms and hitting it. What I did was I came up with the idea of taking rags and then burying them, or actually covering them in 1 and 2 inch masking tape. Now this one is not completely covered, but the idea worked, and I started to do it every year around Christmas time. I'd actually make about between 20 and 30 rag balls. The beauty of the rag balls is you could, once you have it set up like this, you could reuse it. You could just put tape over it, okay? It works well, and I taught my team how to do the soft toss with it, and you can actually hit it off the tape. Now, as far as the rags go, and I just did this right before I went on the air, I went down to the home center and I spent about $13 and I got these rags. They're not like clothes rags. They're like professional cloth, professional white rags that says works like cloth. They're just as effective as clothes rags. So you could take it and you could wrap up this with, this is 1.5 inch masking tape. You could use 1 inch masking tape too. And what's great about this, and check with your league, you never want to do a soft toss with hard balls against the screen. But make sure who's ever in charge of maintenance, show them the rag balls and say, look, is it okay if we do the soft toss or we hit off the tee with this, and see what he says? It should be fine, okay? All right, while I'm showing you this too, and I just did an episode on this where I have different color masking tape. Keep it in mind, this is painter's tape. You could use blue, red, or white. They sell different colors. There are some creative toss drills you can do with that, which you could see in another episode. Another item to use, and there's becoming a shortage of it, just because they are not printing a lot of newspapers. But I found that if I take 2 newspapers and I roll it up, I could use this, throwing it and having the player hit the ball, okay? You could also hit it off the tee, But this also, the newspaper is good for catching. And you could do it very close to the player or your son and daughter. Again, this is a non-threatening item for like 5 and 6-year-old kids that's very effective. If you can't find newspapers, you could cut up a shopping bag, an old-fashioned shopping bag, which now might cost you a nickel in the store. So that's another item, okay? Another thing I did, and I had an advantage because my family was in the lumber business. And since I've done it, I don't know if somebody saw my idea, they just came up with it, was I took a 1/2-inch piece of plywood, I made it into a circle, okay? And what I did is I took the glove, a cloth glove, cut off the fingertips, and I attached it to the back. You can attach it with like Gorilla Glue, but what I did is, if I remember, I stuck in a staple gun and I stapled it down. And the point of this is, and I had my son and daughter put their hand in it like this. When I threw them ground balls, they had to catch it with 2 hands. But what you're creating the act of having them move their feet. All right, because I tried to teach them, when you're catching a ground ball, try to catch it in the middle of your body. So I want them to move the feet. I want them not to get in the habit of reaching with the glove hand. All right, too many kids today get in the habit, they think just because their parents bought a $300 glove for them, if they reach out to snatch it, the ball's going to go automatically in. It doesn't work like that. You got to move a little with your feet. You got to work a little to make the play. All right, so that's a 1/2-inch plywood. I took an old ping pong racket, I cut off the handle, and I used that too. All right, so that's an idea. If you could see this now, something like it, where it's being sold in the sporting goods stores. Again, I don't know if they got the idea from me years ago or what, but that's another good item. Okay, moving along, I showed you and at the end of this, I'm going to show you 2 or 3 drills that are using some of the things I'm using. I showed you the rag ball. What I did is I came up with the idea with a rag ball, and it's attached to a nylon rope, okay? The way I did this is I wrapped the rag ball around the nylon rope, and then I wrapped the masking tape. I put 2 knots in this, okay? And they're about, I guess, a foot apart. And what I did is I hung it up from my deck, and my son would take a bat and he would just hit it all day long. He'd come home from school and hit it all day long. The reason for the knots are so it doesn't slide off. It just slides up to the knot. And I'll show you a picture towards the end. I have it in one of my drills. So that's pretty good. Someone had recommended for me to use a wire. I just think it can be there could be a danger aspect. So I like the nylon rope, but you could be creative. And by the way, I'm going to give you my email at the end of this. If you have a creative drill you've done at home, making a household item, I'd like you to send it to me, all right? Because I'm going to have more of these on homemade drills with homemade items, and I'll be happy to give you credit. Okay, so that's the rag ball on a rope. One of the other things I also did with my T-ball team, and when I was commissioned, I encouraged it. I had told the coaches, try this at home, you and your son or daughter first. Take your recycle bin, take out anything that's dangerous, like cans, the sharp top of cans, anything else. Basically, you're left with mostly plastic. And put that on the tee. For instance, and I'll show you my water bottle, plastic water bottle, we would put on the tee. They have to hit the item, the recycle item, off the tee. Now, I also did that with the toss drill. It was a big hit, and all the coaches that used it said it was a big hit too. And the kids, they got a big kick out of doing it because they've become familiar with the process at their home or at their apartment about how to recycle things too. So that's a very, very nice drill. Okay, I'll show you a picture of that in a couple of minutes too. Another thing I did was also the hitting nets at the time when my kids were young were incredibly expensive. I came up with the idea where I went down to the home center and I got a tarp, which was no more than $12, $15. I got 4 bicycle hooks. I got bungee cords. And what I did is in my backyard, I had 2 trees, which were like about 10 or 12 feet apart. I put in the bicycle hooks, 4 of them, on each tree, one on top and one on the bottom on each side, okay? And then I took the 4 bungee cords like this. Here's the bungee cord, it's about 10 or 12 inches. I put it in the corner of the tarp. I wrapped it around the tree and attached it to the hook. The setup was we had a tarp, which I was able to do the soft toss with. And it worked out great. So I'd like you to look into trying that. It's something creative you can do. You're going to need a ladder. And you could also do, later on, I learned how to do it under my deck, where I use all 4 corners. And I did the same thing. I wrapped around the bungee cord. And of course, you didn't need the hook if you use your deck. And I was able to put the hook or the end of the bungee cord into the corner of the tarp. Make sure, and I think they all do, the tarps that you get have this little metal ring at the end, just so you can stick the bungee cord end into it. Works good. The one thing I'll tell you is you can't hit a golf ball against the tarp. It's going to go right through it, because a friend of mine tried it. So that's another item that you could use. And we're going to wrap this up. I'm going to show you a couple of drills. But before we do, excuse me, I just want to show you a couple of things I used. I spent a lot of time using a racquetball racket and like tennis balls, hit fly balls, worked out great. I spent a lot of time, I did this with my team, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. We played a game, and I started in my backyard when my son was in T-ball. And I put it in a number of my books. It's called Cinder Block Home Run Derby, where I bounce a tennis ball, okay, off of a 4-inch cinder block, and they swing the tennis racket like it's a bat. And the ball goes far, and hopefully you get along with the neighbors. It's going to go pretty far. Also, you could use plastic balls. There's something called a pickleball, which is a great item. This isn't it. A pickleball is good. Keep in mind, a pickleball is not like a wiffle ball. If a player or your son or daughter get hit with a pickleball, they could hurt. I've had a lot of success with pickleballs. I've also used the small wiffle balls to challenge my son or daughter. Another item I found, which was great, these big red plastic bats, and this isn't even the biggest they make. They make it bigger. I do a ton of things with my kids and now my grandkids. In fact, I have about 3 or 4 of these bats at their houses because they just love some of the games. And what we're doing, because the bat is thicker at the sweet spot, we're putting the player or your son and daughter in the best position to succeed. Okay, so grab some of these. They're not that expensive, and make use of them. I used to play games with my 14-year-old team when I coached juniors and seniors too. Okay, let's go over a couple of drills. All right. I mentioned the recycle toss. Here you see the bucket. Again, take out the sharp items. Just keep the plastic and you toss it. Now, this is not showing a great picture. You should be on one knee, 45-degree angle. You could toss it against a wall or a fence. But actually, I've done this where the player hits the ball out in space. Let me hold it up close for a second. All right. That's the recycle toss drill. But before that, too, you might want to try the recycle bin T drill. And all we're doing is we're sticking an item from the recycle bin on a batting tee. Now, if you're using a detergent plastic container, it's a lot bigger than like a water bottle, okay? So keep that in mind. Another great drill, kids get a big kick out of it. I showed you newspaper, and I'm just showing you a picture here of newspaper toss drill. You can stand very close to your son and daughter because the newspaper slows up and actually separates a little. If you wanted to, it's up to you. You could roll up a newspaper and just wrap it once with 1-inch masking tape. All right. And I showed you the rag ball on a rope. As I hear thunder today, I'm outside of New York City. And here's a picture, and it's exactly how I did in my backyard for my kids, where the rag ball is on the rope. It doesn't show, as I showed you, the knots, but you have to have those 2 knots in it, okay, to stop it from moving like that. And it should show more rope down there. So those are the couple of drills. We're going to wrap it up, and I'm going to get into the trivia answer in just a second. Just a quick parental tip. I ran into someone this weekend. They have parents, good family, they're out in California, involved in Hollywood, and they're really shakers and movers, I guess. But I don't want to say appalled, I was shocked that the son had told me he never really sat down to have dinner with his parents at the same time. I said, well, how do you eat dinner? He said, I had it. It was always made by the cook that had it in my room. What I want to say is, please go out of your way, try at least once a week, even more, to have dinner as a family. I think it's so important. And when I say have dinner as a family, not every night, but try most nights to have the TV off and put away the cell phones. It's so important. Okay. All right. Should I do products, or should I do the end of the trivia? Let me just show you a couple of products. The drills I showed you are T-ball drills. I highly recommend it. We're filming this in May. Father's Day is coming up. I do your dad a favor if he's involved in T-ball, or if he has a son and daughter that are going to go into T-ball. Grab this book. It has 110 drills. Okay, another item. And again, I always tell you, don't spend money you don't have. Check out your library for my products. My videos are on Hoopla, Canopy, and Overdrive. They're free through your local library. So please check them out. But if you are going to spend money, you're involved in T-ball, I highly recommend you get my book, Baseball Coaching, a guide for the youth coach and parent. The reason I'm telling you is because I promise you, if you get it while your son and daughter just starting T-ball, you're going to use this, if you're involved in coaching, as a resource for at least the next 5 years. So again, I didn't look at the latest price, but if the price is like, I think it's like $16, $17 divided by 5, it's a little more than $3 a year for your son and daughter. Highly worthwhile. I don't like you spending money if you don't have to, but this is one book that you will keep referring to. It has over 60 sample practices, 200 pictures, and a lot of good stuff. It also has, believe it or not, It has about 19 grammatical errors. In my haste trying to get this out in time, I went past a step I should have. So you will excuse me with the grammatical errors, but I highly recommend it. Please, if you like this format, please subscribe. I'm going to try to put out content, not just in baseball, softball, but other sports. I'll have some more interviews, but I really am asking you, please subscribe, and I appreciate it. The question was, let's see, the soccer, okay? Only one team has been in all 21 World Cup tournaments, which spanned 88 years. Who's the team? Let me look up and get the answer. The team, the country, I mean, is Brazil. And in fact, Brazil has won it 5 times. So I'll put some links at the bottom of this. And if you like some of the props I did, I recommend you look at my video. It's for free. Backyard baseball drills. I will put the link to that right after I put this up, which it'll be up obviously when you're seeing it. So for Schupak Sports, this has been Marty Schupak. Until next time, and if you're a son and daughter, I promise you, they'll become a superstar in something, and I'll help you find out what it is. I'll meet you at third base.